We're here back with another episode of the BWE Podcast, Mission Control. I'm here today with BWE originator, Senior Vice President Tony Love. He's an expert in affordable housing and FHA lending. In today's episode, we're going to get into a little bit about construction with new affordable properties, some of the challenges that they're facing with the rising cost of construction. We got increased inflation, some different things that you're able to do and help borrowers work with lenders to get funding for some construction materials. We'll get into a little bit of that. And I did want to just mention that this episode is a part of the FHA Today newsletter that the affordable team is putting out pretty regularly. So if you want to be a part of that, get the regular updates from the experts themselves, shoot an email over marketing@bwe.com, or feel free to shoot Tony an email. Sure. That's tony.love@bwe.com. So let's just jump right into it. Like I mentioned, the topic, we're going to talk about new construction affordable and kind of what's going on with that space. A lot of challenges to overcome with borrowers and developers. I guess, what's the status of everything going on? Big question, but...
I mean, it is the issue du jour right now in affordable housing. I think in any housing construction development project, developers are being double whammied. There's certainly inflation in terms of the cost of supplies, to build the project or to renovate the project, as well as the rapidly rising interest rates. These are still historically very, very good interest rates. It's just that when you were planning a project, 3 or 4 months ago at a 3.5% rate, and today it's at 5%, or 5.5%, or even higher, it makes a big difference in what that capital stack looks like for the project. And then, of course, over the past year and a half, or I would even say throughout the pandemic, contractors have just been really, really hit hard by rising construction costs, supply chain disruptions, the length of time that it takes to complete a project, and the additional cost of carrying that project because of the delays. It's just really creating a lot of financial pressures on developers to affordably develop affordable housing. So much of the affordable housing projects are developed not only with debt, but certainly with low-income housing tax credits, and oftentimes subordinate debt, or gap funding is what we call it. It's been very, very challenging in this environment to plan out a project that typically takes 9 to 12 months when all these variables are changing so rapidly. And that's the real conundrum for the developer and the development team.
When we talk about the delays and things like that, a lot of it can come from materials and not being able to get the materials that they need. Mm-hmm. Previous to firing up the cameras, you talked about, just simple things that people might not think about is, you need a certain number of toilets and now you don't have them, and things like that. So I guess, what is a way that you guys are looking at doing and working with lenders to maybe get some stuff pre-ordered, stored, mm-hmm. things like that? Kind of, if you can talk through what some of those strategies can be.
Yeah, so I mean, really kind of one of the best things that we can help the developer and the development team, the contractor with, is walking them through a process to allow for payment of these materials well in advance of when they are supposedly scheduled for installation. So using your example, for example, toilets or windows or doors, anything like that, cabinets. Traditionally, at least in the world of FHA financing, neither the lender or HUD really wanted to go down the path of pre-ordering materials and either storing them on site or even off-site. Just because of they become much more susceptible to vandalism, theft, things of that nature. And so in this environment, though, HUD certainly recognizes the need to allow for that. They're being much more flexible. Different offices may have a different take on it, but the offices that we've been working with most frequently seem to understand this and are in fact very flexible on it. So let's say, today, in today's environment, a contractor would go out and order, in the normal course of things, a 100-unit project, all 1 bedroom, 1 bath. They'd want 100 toilets. And the delivery supplier shows up with 30 toilets. And the contractor says, well, when can I get my other 70 toilets? And I don't know, whenever they come in. So it's not as though you can kind of go about it in the traditional way of ordering things. You really do have to look at pre-ordering these. So usually when we close or are about to close, the contractor will go ahead and order up a full range of major building components. Now, depending on the type of project or the configuration of the project, they may be able to locate storage pods on site, which would be very, very helpful to store some of those materials. We've had lumber, cabinets, like I said, doors, toilets, plumbing fixtures, any number of kind of major building components stored on site on those various projects. In some cases, maybe in more urban, densely built up or tightly confined sites, it's not possible to really store materials on site. So the contractor is going to have to locate a warehouse or some other off-site facility to store those materials. And with that becomes a little bit more risk. It becomes much more difficult to keep the building materials organized and strictly limited or, I guess, labeled for a particular job. And then, of course, you're drawing upon those stored materials over the next course of weeks or months. So if you've already paid for those materials and now are incorporating it into the project, you just have to kind of keep track of that in terms of your draw requests. You're also going to have to amend the construction contract to specifically list out what types of building materials are you going to store off-site and request payment for. You're going to have to keep the surety bond on that off-site storage facility. And the contractor is going to have to carry insurance on those materials as well. So there's a number of administrative things that we would have to do that is much more administratively intense than we normally do. But it certainly pales in the comparison when you're looking at having to extend out a very lengthy construction period because you're sitting around waiting for these materials to show up.
Well, they say time is money. You know,
time is definitely money,
right.
For sure.
And, you talk about, there's a lot of risks that can be associated with lenders and some challenges, all these things that you're talking about. With all that being said, though, if you can speak on some of the successes you've had working with both parties, the borrowers and lenders, and been able to kind of work through some of those challenges and get them to get on board with maybe supplying some of the funds in certain ways that maybe they weren't comfortable with in the past.
Sure. I think really when you're dealing with a HUD-insured loan, it's a highly regulated debt instrument, debt program. So, clearly HUD is a part in the decision-making of this. And as a regulator, they have to be a part of the overall decisions on some of these unusual circumstances. So what we try to do with the sponsor, developer, and general contractor is to bring up the topic at the concept meeting stage early on, talk with HUD, what's going on in the construction market, what is it that we're going to be requesting in our applications. If it's a two-part application process, or if we go straight to the firm commitment application processing stage, we'll always include a description of it in the narrative write-up for the underwriting narrative. And then, of course, when we prepare closing documents, we'll amend the construction contract and provide whatever other certifications and documentation HUD wants to see so that they know that we're doing all our appropriate due diligence to secure those off-site storage materials. I would say too, Ryan, there's a couple other things that developers are doing as well. A lot of the projects I work with here in Ohio, but also in some other states, developers are going to local government and they're requesting perhaps special dispensation on real estate taxes. There may be abatement, or there may be some type of long-term pilot arrangement for affordable housing that the local government or local assessor would be willing to do. In some cases, also here in Ohio, we're seeing there's an ability to exempt the project's building supplies from state and local sales tax. So that can also help decrease the cost of construction. And then finally, there's always the, unfortunate task of going back to the state, local, county government agencies and just asking for whatever available subsidy is available to offset those costs. Again, it's just a very difficult time in terms of the amount of time that it takes you to plan the project and get to closing, and all the intervening, cost adjustments that it takes while you're getting to closing. Every time we turn around, it seems like there's a new gap. So developers have to work with their lender partners and state and local government agencies to make the arrangements work out well for the project. Unfortunately, in the end, even if it's affordable housing, it's still real estate development, and it carries some element of risk. But we try our best to work through those risk issues with the developer and their development team.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sitting down with me today. It's some great stuff, and all these challenges and tough things. Good to have someone like you on the side of the borrowers and to help navigate all these challenges and so forth. So.
It is a challenge, but we certainly try our best to help wherever we can. Appreciate it. Thanks.